Thank you so much, Sam. We'll jump right into the material. First, we can take a look at the table of contents. This is what I plan to go through today, and really focusing on the top 25 issues, which I've put little symbols by them. Those are either current items or just the most likely questions you're likely to receive this year regarding health savings accounts. There have been some changes due to the Affordable Care Act. We will cover quickly. The first part of this 2014 updates has a lot of slides. But really most of those slides I'm going to let you look at it on your own, or if you need them for a report to a board or an employer possibly, you can pull those later. But let's go ahead and get started. First, just the annual updates for the dollar amounts. They went up by a little bit this year to $3,300 for individuals and $6,550 for families. The high deductible health limits did not change on the low end, $1,250 for individuals and $2,500 for families is the minimum in order to have a high deductible health plan, which is not very high. And then the maximum out-of-pockets went up just slightly. I'll let you look at that on your own. This next chart is kind of, again, to digest on your own later, but it shows that 2014 is really the big year for the Affordable Care Act. Some of the impact of this year has been reduced due to, I think I just read there were 27 delays in the Affordable Care Act and counting, and a lot of those delays affected this year. But this really is supposed to be the big year for not for HSAs, but for the Affordable Care Act. We'll talk about some of these on additional slides, but the bottom one here is the minimum out-of-pocket expenses or maximum out-of-pocket expenses. This one is important to health savings accounts because historically a lot of Americans that were looking for the cheapest insurance would buy plans that had high deductibles, and they might think they were eligible for an HSA, but in fact they weren't because their maximum out-of-pocket exceeded the HSA high deductible health care limits. That's a little bit complex, but basically starting this year, it's illegal to offer those plans. Now, again, there have been some waivers and some things happening in the industry that create some confusion around this point. But for the basic rule is starting this year, it's impossible to have really a high deductible health plan without also being eligible for an HSA. There are some exceptions to that, but a lot less exceptions than was true in 2013. I'm going to talk just briefly about a few of these slides are really beyond maybe the timeline we have in this 2 hours, but they are worth a mention so that you have the concept in the back of your head a little bit if in case it comes up in a discussion. The first one is medical loss ratios. Medical loss ratios actually took effect in 2011. There's a year lag, so the first time we knew about this was really late 2012, and now we've had 2 years of experience. And the worry about medical loss ratios is that insurance companies would stop offering high deductible health plans, which are the only health plan you can have to be eligible for an HSA. And in fact, a whole slew of insurance companies did stop offering high deductible health plans back when the law first passed because the thinking was they couldn't get through the medical loss ratio issue, which is basically Obama health care reform makes you have fairly rich insurance. But to oversimplify the point is the insurance companies have figured out how to live with this medical loss ratio. They are having to give some rebates back, but they're affordable number of rebates. And high deductible health plans and HSAs have made it through this process really pretty much unscathed other than those early people that pulled out of the market. Now, starting in this year, is the first time that we have another thing very similar to medical loss ratios, equally confusing and baffling for the average American, but it's something called actuarial value. This is another measure, another tool the federal law uses to make sure that Americans buy insurance that's kind of, in the government's viewpoint, a good deal. And this is when you hear about the medals on the exchanges, especially with the Olympics right now. There's a parallel to that. But you have to have a platinum plan, for instance, is the best plan because it pays for the most of your medical expenses. The problem with the platinum plan from an average American's perspective is it's so expensive that nobody buys them. So as you get to the lower level plans, the bronze plan, and actually now Congress has a bill before it right now that I think the administration's in favor of that would start a new plan, the copper plan. And the reason that they want these lower level plans is they're more affordable. But the initial thinking was that it was going to be hard for high-deductible health plans to even be on the exchanges or to be considered health plans because they aren't rich enough. And again, it's a confusing concept, but to oversimplify it, if you think of if I pay a really high premium and my insurance covers all of my expenses, that's a platinum plan. If instead I buy what's more likely a high-deductible health plan with an HSA, and I save a lot on premiums, but the reason I'm saving so much is because I have to pay the first $5,000 of expenses, well, that right now, a lot of those plans have ended up being silver and bronze plans. So they are in the exchanges. This is not a big worry, but the concern was that they wouldn't even meet the actuarial requirements for being a bronze plan. And this is still a concern, so I'm mentioning it because it's still something to think about. And the HSA contributions do count towards the actuarial value. That's a little more complex than I want to get into, but you can look at that in case you have an employer or a business ever asking you about that. The FSA limit, this is not doesn't directly apply to HSAs, but there's a fair amount of confusion where flexible spending accounts are very similar to health savings accounts, and to your average employee, they kind of throw the terms around interchangeably. And because of that, the government's Affordable Care Act capped FSAs at $2,500. So this is actually true last year, but it's still new enough that you might get the question where people think HSAs are also capped at $2,500. They're not. And because this $2,500 cap at FSAs is somewhat detrimental, we are starting to see more interest in HSAs. I have a series of slides here that just are more getting at, how are HSAs doing? Should you be investing in this business right now if you're the owner of your financial institution, or if you're trying to decide from a career perspective, are these accounts here to stay? Are they going to grow? There's a lot of still open questions on that, but I think you'll see in this next series of slides that this has been nothing but a straight upward march for every single year. Essentially, there's been more HSAs opened. There's been larger balances in the HSA. There's more institutions offering HSAs. So it's been a very positive message from an HSA perspective. This gives you some of those numbers if you want to see just how many of the accounts there are. I've got a few charts in here that we'll go through rapidly that just kind of show this growth as well. This is a nice one that projects forward from Devenir Investments. You don't get a much better bar graph than that. I mean, it really just shows very, very rapid growth in the deposit size of health savings accounts. And this next chart shows the percentage growth. And the blue line, or the lower line, shows that it looks like it's going down, and it is, but this is the number of new HSAs. It's still a 9% growth in 2013. So the message, I think, here is health savings accounts have kind of matured to the point where that super rapid number of new accounts is not as rapid. Although 9% growth is still something admirable for how fast our economy is growing overall. But then there was a 46% growth, the higher line, the red line, of assets or deposits. So it's the money in these accounts is growing faster than the number of accounts. So I think if you're still trying to figure out where to be in this business, you can see it's growing. HRAs are another type of account that's similar to an HSA, and it's probably good if you're going to be in this business to understand that a flexible spending account, an FSA, is different than a healthcare reimbursement account, which is an HRA, which is different than a health savings account, which is an HSA, but all three get thrown into the same buckets for discussions. This particular chart breaks them out, and you'll see that HRAs are capping off a little bit, dropping a little bit this last year, and HSAs have continued to grow. One reason for that that does relate a little bit to this discussion is that you can't, under the Affordable Care Act, employers are trying to figure out what to do with their health insurance. If they don't offer health insurance, they get penalized. But a lot of employers are also finding out that if they don't offer health insurance, their employees can go to the federal exchanges, buy health insurance.